There we go. Birds of a feather thinking the same thing. So your stream is hosting right now, is that correct? What's a phone book? Okay. What? Ah. Is that called Drogo? Much better. I got Ned. Heisenberg.
Good morning, how are you? I'm Dr. Worm. I'm interested in things. I'm not a real doctor, but I am a real
I've heard mixed opinions.
Oh, Gandhi. Are we ready? All right.
We are ready.
Hey guys, how's it going? Let me get rid of this. There we go. There we go.
Hello, people of
Hey,
the internet.
how's it going? Welcome to Evolutionary Medicine. I think my thingy is a little off. Maybe you moved over. Let me fix it a little. Make you more even, because I'm supposed to be like that. Yet another topic we should probably talk about on here. All right, cool. Hey, how's it going, guys?
Fantastic.
This is Thader, Mike's Eye. What's up? How's it going? Welcome to Evolutionary Medicine. I am Kate, and I am joined by Dr. Joe and Dr. Coffee, as usual.
Hello, everybody.
And we also have Dr. Gandhi up above us.
Hello.
All the way from the
Hi,
West
Gandhi.
Coast. I may have to turn him up quite a bit. So let me know if you guys can hear him okay.
So we are lucky to have a
yes.
real sleep researcher
Yay.
joining us today in the form of Gandhi up above.
Yes, our mantelpiece, of course.
No, but super cool that you were able to join in, Gandhi.
Pleasure.
You were gonna make this episode really happen. It's really gonna pop because of you.
Oh,
No one
anything
will
I can
fall
do
asleep
to pay
during
you back. I don't know if you guys knew this, but when I was writing my last grant, I was totally at a loss because my program officer told me not to even bother resubmitting because NIH doesn't fund that kind of
No.
research. And in desperation and destitution, I called up Joe. It was the first time I talked to him since my defense. And he...
Right, so you have to be desperate to call me.
Well, you don't have to, but usually I like to maintain contact with someone before I ask them for favors. But Joe didn't care, and he very generously spent some time on the phone with me. He gave me a lot of really great advice that was extremely helpful, And more than anything else, he got me really fired up to write my resubmission. And it really helped and made a big difference.
That's like maybe the only time anyone has ever said that they were fired up to resubmit.
Fired up. So did you get the grant?
No, I got 1 bad reviewer and 2 near perfect scores.
Ooh,
So-
whoa. Okay.
That's the worst.
I'll be submitting my grant again for the April 8th deadline.
Oh, okay. So that's like Sunday.
Yes, it's all I've been working.
Dang. Well, either I'm happy that you are joining us because otherwise you would be crazy busy, or I'm happy to give you a welcome distraction.
I'm happy for both.
We're going to go with distraction.
Yes, yeah. You might need it.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, we are here talking about sleep. We're having some wine, and we're joined by a sleep researcher. So, Gandhi, I know you have told me before that you didn't necessarily set out to study sleep. So before we kind of get into the actual topic of sleep, would you tell us a little bit about how you sort of fell upon the topic of sleep and what it is that you do?
Let's get the big picture on Gandhi.
Yeah.
The whole enchilada, as it were.
It's tasty.
I didn't put my mic on, guys. I'm sorry.
So,
I don't know how you guys have heard me this whole time. Probably not. Okay.
early in my graduate student my second year, I was trying to come up with a summer project, and I asked my advisor, Hilly Kaplan, for some advice on how to pick one. And he gave me the very succinct, narrow focused advice on how to choose a summer project by saying, think about the kind of career you want to have, what you want your lifetime contribution to science to be. And so I had a midlife.
You're talking so the easy questions.
No
Yeah,
pressure.
I was like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
heavy hitters.
It made the summer project seem much easier in comparison. But I actually did try to think about his advice, and I thought about the direction of research I wanted to go in. I really like studying behavior. I also think biology is really cool, and I think that the way that biology can affect changes in behavior and vice versa is extremely interesting. You tend to think behavior is something you consciously decide to do rather than being the product of biological reactions happening within your body. And so I told all this to Hilly. I think at the time, someone we knew was interviewing for a job at Emory or something. He was talking to someone there who studies sleep. It was on his mind. He had suggested it to me as a topic to look into. I had never thought about it before. I didn't really think it was that interesting. But the more I thought about it, the more I read, the more I realized how little we know about it. I started to come up with some theoretical models to address some of the gaps in literature. It started to seem kind of cool. I think there's
And so just to be clear, so Gandhi, you were doing you were getting your PhD in anthropology.
Yep.
right.
Of evolutionary anthropology.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
We were in the same cohort.
Hey, I know an evolutionary anthropologist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it makes sense that all humans kind of need to sleep. So it seems like a perfectly anthropological thing to study.
It's true.
I think for
See, I wouldn't have said that.
No?
No, because everything needs to sleep. I mean, bees sleep.
Does everything need to sleep?
There are some animals.
Not
that
quite
don't.
We're going to have to
everything.
get into this because we were
Right, we will.
Don't,
But
Yeah.
the point is, whatever it
sharks,
is, it
like,
far
only turn
predates
off?
humanity.
They turn off like half their brain and stay half awake.
Dolphins.
Dolphins and birds
Yeah, maybe it's dolphins.
do
But
unihemispheric
I was
sleep.
going to ask,
Okay.
we're immediately going off topic.
Yeah, sure.
We're stepping on our experts' lines here.
But maybe you should finish telling us about your background.
Sure. So I just started thinking about it. And how do you decide what's the right amount to sleep is the question everyone wants to know. And I was studying life history theory at the time, and I was thinking about trade-offs, and I was thinking that, in our own lives, we experience trade-offs with sleep quite saliently. You feel really tired.
So for the uninitiated, what's a good example of a trade-off just in general?
So
people that don't know about life history theory.
When you've got two choices to make at any given time, and both have their own costs and benefits associated with them, you have to choose one. You can't do both. So I'll give you an example relating to sleep. If you've got, you finally
sleep at the same time. You can't eat and sleep at the same time.
You can't eat and sleep at the same time. That's very true. Believe me, I've tried, and it did not end well. Made a mess and I choked. No, if you have to choose between staying up all night studying for your final exam, getting a good night's sleep, that would be a trade-off. There's costs and benefits with both things. You might be more tired when you take the test, and so you perform worse, but the extra studying may make a big difference so that you perform better. So then how do you know which one to do? And is usually the case in life, the answer is somewhere in the middle. You don't stay up all night, but maybe you stay up an extra 3 hours, for example. But why 3? Why not 2? Why not 4?
Right.
That's a more quantitative kind of way to ask the question, which eventually I would like to get to. But for now, if we can just establish that you've got decision making to how much you're supposed to sleep, and that sleep actually is supposed to be this kind of flexible phenotype, this flexible behavior. If you think of sleep as a behavior,
just like everything else,
right?
Yeah.
That's very different. No one says we recommend that you get 7 hours tonight, but 8 hours tomorrow. They just say X is the magic number. Sleep it every night. I kind of want to move away from it.
But we kind of do the same thing for lots of stuff in medicine too, though, right? So maybe the magic 7 hours of sleep, but we say your temperature should be 98.6, your heart rate should be 70, your blood pressure should be no more than 120 over 70. So we have all kinds of little thresholds like this in medicine. It doesn't take into consideration your point, which is that everything kind of is changing and dynamic and is a outcome of some of the trade-offs that you just talked about.
Right.
Well, we've talked a little about this before, I think, but the power of medicine comes from large numbers and statistical inference, but you have to individualize everything. So we know on average, let us say, how many calories you need per pound or kilogram, but an individual might gain or lose weight on that exact number of calories per kilogram per day because of differences in their metabolism and various things.
Absolutely.
So sleep, I think you're suggesting, might follow that. What we really have in our mind is a bell-shaped curve, and when we say this is how much sleep you need, we mean the middle of that curve.
Right. Yes, and that is also a very valuable question we may not have answered as yet, definitively, inclusively, with consensus. But I think that if we were to phrase it as defining middle of a bell curve, as opposed to defining the middle of a bullseye on a dartboard, that's a very different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it frustrates people when, let us say they have a bad diagnosis. Well, doc, how long do I have? And they want the doc to say, well, you have 3 months, 5 days, and 7 hours. What the doc really visualizes is, again, one of these curves, and he picks something middle-ish and goes, on average, 3 months. And the patient is unhappy because it feels like weasel wording. But the fact is, everything's a probability spread.
Sure. Yeah. Luna Deer just had a good comment in chat, actually. Thank you for the follow, by the way. So these are just guidelines, and like anything, it's just some place for us to begin the discussion and get some bearings, but not the end-all to the thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm wondering maybe if this is another area that might at some point get lumped under personalized medicine at some point. That maybe it's not 7 hours for everyone, but maybe somebody needs only 5 and they do just fine, and then other people need more or whatever, and that becomes part of your conversation with your doctor.
Well, it's certainly depending on how old you are. If you're an infant and you go to your doctor, or a neonate and you say, Doc, how much should I sleep? The doc is going to give that infant some very different advice than if you were 20 years old, or if you were 40 or 60 or 70. So we do know that the sleep patterns change throughout age.
For Joe, like 8 hours at my age, 15 minutes a night, something like that.
This is why coffee gets so much work done.
Hey, I mean, some of the, like, I know some of the, like, big Silicon Valley people sleep for, like, 4 hours.
They claim
and
to.
They claim to. And
Don't you think they're lying?
I don't know, because I do know that Ariana Huffington is really big on sleep. And she's
Right.
like, you got to get your X hours.
No, undoubtedly there are some people that claim they can get by on little sleep. And there is, like you mentioned, Gandhi, there is variation in this trait,
Yeah.
just like any other.
Right.
But the people that use lack of sleep as bragging rights, and this actually happens in medicine too. Docs will say, I don't need to sleep, or I don't need to worry about being on call. I don't need staying up all night doesn't affect me. But I think this is a wishing away of biology, because in fact, all of us need sleep, and very few of us can actually function on very little sleep, and very few of us can actually work an overnight shift and then function as they would the next day if they'd actually gotten a good night's sleep.
Right.
So there are some people that seem to do okay. I know them, but in general, I think this is denial of biology.
I mean, that's also super relevant for doctors too, right? Everybody talks about how, you're going through your residency and they're doing like 36, 48-hour shifts, etc., on very little sleep. So it's not exactly going to provide the best care when you're on so little sleep. So very relevant to how doctors can actually perform their work too. Also, Hosebeats, thank you so much for those 10 months.
Yeah,
Thank you.
But I think to so we can, if I were to play, the traditional, say, Center for Disease Control's standard advice, it is that, we need to get at least 7 hours of sleep a night. We should get it every night. And in fact, we need to get a good night's sleep before every day's, every work day. But in fact, we don't actually do that in real life. And I think what of course, in medicine, we stay up all night and work in the ER. People do stay up on call, and our trainees do work some crazy hours, although that's been limited recently. But I think just to kind of foreshadow a little bit of Gandhi's work, Gandhi has kind of punctured some of these myths that, in fact, the idea that we should all be getting eight hours sleep a night probably isn't true. Wouldn't you agree, Gandhi?
I would. I actually support the public health recommendations as they are. I think it's great advice to say, eat healthy, exercise every day, don't eat fried food or fast food. That's great advice. It's also not realistic for every day of your life, anyway. And by the same token, if you aim to get 8 hours of sleep a night, 7 hours of sleep a night, whatever, you're a lot more likely to get enough sleep than if you weren't aiming for anything at all.
Sure.
If you're not going to get 7 or 8 hours when you really want to, chances are you're going to have a pretty strong motivation to not get that sleep because you've prioritized it. And so you've shifted the trade-offs.
Where have your thoughts moved, Gandhi, in terms of what you think would be a healthy range of sleep? Or is that the way I should ask the question?
I think that there's certainly individual variation. And actually, my last paper that is currently in press shows that within a single individual, sleep varies more than it does between people for Chimpanzee. Chimpanzee are Amazonian ethnic group, tribe, whatever you want to call it, that lives in Bolivia. I did my dissertation research. They don't have days of the week setting their work schedules for them. So presumably, without that and without electricity, they should sleep some kind of normal way. I don't think that's really fair to say, but what is interesting to see is that the amount of variation from night 1 to night 2 for the same person is comparable in that population as it is to the people living in the United States who do have the 5-day work week, weekdays and weekends,
Right.
and electricity.
It's just It's like split up differently, right?
So do the Chimpanzee, just again, I guess for me and for others, do the Chimpanzee have electricity? Do they have electric light?
They have no electric lights.
No electric light whatsoever. Do they have iPods?
They do not.
Or at least iPhones?
Nope. They don't.
Anything emitting blue light that disturbs
they
our
got
sleep.
nothing to mess up their
So, folks, send in your money so we can send iPads to the Chimpanzee.
Right.
They don't even have
They will
roads
sleep
connecting their
worse.
villages. It would be generous to say the footpaths in the dirt constitute roads. They certainly don't have power lines or running water.
They do have fire, yes.
They do have
Now,
fire.
another
They do have
interesting
they do have
group of
fire.
studies that would bear on this would be cave studies that have been done several times that I've read about, where they take people deep underground, the environment isn't changing, the lighting isn't changing, they're as isolated from environmental circadian cues as they can be, and their cycle tends to get longer than 24 hours, and their sleep cycle tends to get longer. Now, I've always speculated some of that might be boredom, although I presume they take, books and things with them, but left to our own devices and with no external prompts to change our pattern, we do seem to go towards some kind of normal sleep rhythm, some sort of regular sleep rhythm, I meant to say, and it seems to be a bit longer than what we think of nowadays as a normal amount of sleep.
Well, that's true, but there are some important caveats with these cave studies. The mechanisms that have evolved sleep did not evolve with people living in caves. So they would have been exposed to the sun coming up and sun going down every day. And if that helps people adjust their clock to maybe not have the 28-hour circadian cycle, may have been including whatever the number is. It's not 24.
It's a little bit more than 24.
It's a bit longer,
Right.
yeah, like 26, I think.
Right.
Yeah, something like that.
That's not actually what ends up happening. People living in the real world who are undergoing natural selection and living or dying based off of the optimality of their sleep patterns or their
What
diet
happens
or
when
anything
people
else.
retire and no longer have to punch a clock? Assuming a cohort of people who retire with adequate resources so that they really are retired, they really are off everybody else's clock, they can do whatever they damn want, what do? They're older,
question.
so that factors in, but what do they do left to their own devices?
That's a good question.
Whatever they want.
Presumably.
Shuffleboard.
Yeah, but what do they want is
Right.
what I'm asking.
What do they want is a very good question. I've seen a lot of heterogeneity in the results in the literature. People who are retired and elderly. There are some instances. The general narrative is that older people have worse sleep because they wake up at 4 a.m. and they don't sleep again. They go to bed at 8 p.m. They end up not sleeping very long, have lots of complaints, and that's kind of the
There's
narrative.
fragmented sleep because of things like prostate enlargement, that sort of thing.
Right,
Listen, guys.
right.
Having to pee all the time.
I think
Right,
that's.
having to pee all the time.
I think that's.
Excuse me, I gotta.
That's probably.
Which, by the way, if we need to take a break, we can. That is a thing we can do.
Thinking about prostates. That's a great segue.
Is it?
That's probably a more reasonable explanation, in my opinion, than the other alternative, which is that they're just so old that their sleep regulating mechanisms have deteriorated, which I don't think is the case. I know that a lot of people do believe that's the case, and there may be some evidence supporting it, but I think there are alternative explanations to that data. I do not see an age-related decline in sleep in the Chimpanzee population.
Interesting.
Well, that's fascinating.
So maybe it's not the absolute numbers that vary between populations, but maybe some populations do see this decline with age in terms of quality or not.
Well,
Is there any evidence of that?
That's the short answer.
Okay.
That's. I think there's a lot of really exciting work happening in the field right now. A lot of people are doing really good work, and they're doing it in different populations. They're going to enable us to make those kinds of comparisons and answer those kinds of
Gotcha.
questions.
Okay. So not yet.
Not yet. My personal speculative opinion is that if your sleep today, your sleep tomorrow, your sleep the next day can be so variable, then environmental conditions can also be variable. And if you change your environmental conditions such that night 1, 2, and 3 more closely resemble one another, you're going to see one pattern for that person. You may see a different pattern for someone else. Take that to the next level and you say, what if it's people who don't have electricity versus people who do?
Because there's this idea, of course, that having electricity is going to disrupt our sleep.
Right.
There's a very common idea, and I think I agree with it, that the fact that we have homes and workplaces in which we have artificial lighting is a big deal. And has a huge capacity to interrupt, exactly. And this thing in particular, I don't know about you, but of course, a lot of public health advice now is don't bring screens in your bedroom.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
Because the blue light gets emitted from your laptop or from
something
your,
like an hour before you go to sleep or something. You're supposed to know.
maybe even before that.
More than an hour.
Just because you don't want to really interfere with that natural, we'll call it, increase in melatonin and the things that regulate sleep. And darkness is one of them. Yeah. So we know that if you wake up in the middle of the night, you look at your screen, you look at your texts, you look at your Twitter feed or whatever, that has a good chance of thoroughly disrupting your sleep.
Yeah, it's probably why after we're on this show, I'm wide awake for a long time. That's not the stimulating conversation? Well, it's probably that.
I was taking credit.
Right.
But these lights are pretty intense.
Right, and they're daylight wavelength. These are blue.
Yes.
It's like 7 in the morning light coming at us right now.
Well, the lights in the industrial age has changed sleep in another way, because we can stay up so much later. In olden times, people more or less went to sleep shortly after sundown,
Chimpanzee times,
and got up, right before or right after the sun rose, and that meant we spent generally more time in bed. But there's been a lot of interest in the last few years over first and second sleep, which actually shows up in old writings, but nobody sort of noticed it, that there was these references to first and second sleep.
So this is the idea that people would get up in the middle of the night, be active for some period of time, and then fall asleep again. So do you see any evidence of first and second sleep in Chimane or in San, hunter-gatherers, or Hadza? I think I know the answer too. But go ahead, Gandhi.
Ooh, what's the answer? I can't wait.
We have not seen anything that resembles that. At least it is not
sleep.
The modal pattern. Say with confidence it is not the modal pattern.
In these tropical hunter-gatherer, horticulturalist groups.
I don't think they're not all tropical. The Chimane are definitely tropical.
No.
But the Hadza, I'm not as familiar with, but I would say they're almost equatorial. The San are absolutely not tropical.
Yeah, that's desert, right?
Yes.
I wonder about the Inuit or Laplanders or some other.
I was just going to ask that.
We'll have the answer, not from me, but we'll have the answer published, I'm sure, in the next 5 years.
Oh yeah,
Let's hope.
Who's doing that work?
David Sampson is. He's a professor at the University of Toronto. He's quite bright, and he's also a sleep anthropologist. I believe. I know he wants to study sleep there. Hopefully, we'll get the opportunity to do so.
I want to be a sleep anthropologist.
Yeah, would you consider yourself a sleep anthropologist now?
I would say so. At the moment, anyway.
Or a sleepy evolutionary anthropologist.
So we've got
a little bit broader umbrella for that.
Right. We have several questions in chat, and I'm gonna tackle some of the less complicated ones first, and then we'll move on to the slightly more complicated ones. All really good ones, though. Okay, so first, 2 about the Chimane. Whoop, there's a bug flying in my face.
It's springtime in Albuquerque.
That's right.
The bugs have emerged.
2 that are just about the Chimane in general. So first, what's the average life expectancy within the Chimane? And how many hours a night do they average?
Life expectancy
on sleep
in these types of populations, as it is worldwide, tends to be lower because there's very high infant mortality. So if you've got, let's say, a family household, without birth control, every time a couple, babies are made. I don't know what's our
no,
rating
tell us about
on
that.
This show?
You can. We are rated mature,
Oh,
so
so every time
Yeah.
they're
as
fornicating,
long as we're not doing
So
anything
you can say
hateful.
words like penis and vagina.
Yes, that's right.
Or boink.
yes, we'll use the academic term. Every time they
Yes.
boink during ovulatory cycle, there could be a pregnancy. And so what ends up happening is you have much more than 2 kids per couple. I believe the Chimane fertility rate is approximately 9. Now,
So how many pregnancies do they have?
That is called natural fertility.
So
right?
lots of babies.
Can be.
Presumably they have more pregnancies than births,
right.
given miscarriage and that sort of thing.
Yes, so it's likely
So-
more than 9. Don't have a number offhand what the number would be, but let's say more than 9. Just for the sake of the example, because the question's about life expectancy. We won't even count miscarriages, which if you were going
A
to
better way to measure life expectancy is if you're 20, how old can you expect to live now?
right. So that's what
so
I'm
if you reach
coming
adulthood.
to. So if you have 9
Yeah.
kids in a household, 3 babies die for their first year, and then the rest live to age 75, your average is going to, someone math to tell you, probably
30.
50.
Somewhere right in the middle, basically.
Yeah.
Move it down
Or
by
less.
a third. So that's
So infant
where.
mortality makes a big impact on
Yes.
overall life expectancy.
Right.
So
And it's measured differently in different parts of the world.
that's right. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you
Yeah.
talk about life expectancy. I don't remember offhand what the number is for Chimane, but there in my sample, who I've recorded sleep with, there is an enormous number of people over 70, over 80.
Right.
The oldest woman in
Wow.
our sample has been estimated to be at an age of 92.
Dang.
And
These
I
are
recall
wily- let me tell you.
Hilly saying that at least for males, Chimane males, that if you make it through adolescence, that the modal age of death was something in the early 70s or mid 70s
That sounds right
for
to me.
Chimane men.
So that's
Yeah.
fairly similar to the U.S., right?
So it's not-
Depending
it's
on
not huge.
sex.
Maybe for a United States smoker, yeah, maybe not too far off.
Well, our life expectancy is coming down, so
Yeah, well, that has to do with opioids.
we got to lower
Yeah.
our bar.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the second question is their average sleep duration.
Yes.
In our
Yes.
in the paper we published in 2015, we looked at sleep in the Chimane population as well as the Hadza and San. Those are both hunter-gatherer groups living in Africa. Hadza are in Tanzania, the San are in Namibia. Between the 3 of them, there was no significant difference between among those 3 populations. You can't say population A has more than B but less than C. They're statistically indistinguishable.
Gotcha.
Does that have to do with the huge intra-person variation that you were talking about?
I would say that's
There's
a
this
very
massive
large
variation?
part of the reason for that, yes.
Okay, so no, but just to paraphrase, no differences between the Chimane, the Hadza, and the San
Correct,
in those 3 groups.
yes. But the typical sleep duration was in the range of 5.7 to 7.1 hours per night. Now,
What?
before
So
I want
low
you to,
compared to what we might think.
before you interpret that number, I want to clarify the methodological distance between those numbers and what your experience is. If you go to bed at
But hang on. So what was the mean?
so we'll say
It's-
let's say around 6 to 6.5 hours is in the middle. 6 hours and 20 minutes, something like that, might be middle.
That's your headline. Hunter gatherers get 6.5 hours of sleep.
Well, do they? Or do they
No,
now?
he's going to give us nuance here
We
in a
didn't
second.
see
right.
much
Yeah,
nap.
I'm stealing his
Didn't
thunder.
see much napping.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the Chimane don't nap apparently.
There's a seasonal effect of that, and that gets more complicated. But before we get into that, I think this is important. If you went to bed at 11 o'clock and you woke up at 7 o'clock, you would say that you slept 8 hours. That's not true. You didn't actually sleep 8 hours. You spent 8 hours
Darn
in
it.
bed. What you
I
actually,
slept 8 hours.
Right.
if you actually slept, probably on average around 6.5, about 85% of time spent in bed is spent asleep. They call that measure sleep efficiency. 85% is a reasonable target that I've seen in the literature, where above that is considered great, normal, no problem. Below that, then it may be more of a concern. If you have 85,
Heck, I can achieve that while I'm working.
right? Exactly.
Or driving.
Yeah,
Driving,
right.
yeah.
I know.
I actually I put a screenshot from The Onion in my dissertation defense where it says the average American needs 8 hours of sleep at work.
Love it.
So bearing that in
Um,
mind, there's actually not that big of a gap between the average sleep duration in the United States and the average sleep duration of these three populations.
And that's the key point, which I think is, we think about the effect of artificial lighting and all the things that we do,
right.
drinking wine, staying up all night, working late in the hospital, and on average, the sleep duration is not that different in these traditional societies.
Right.
If
Yeah.
we
So-
spend less time in bed, does our sleep efficiency improve, or does that actually equate to less sleep?
Good question. Somebody just asked that actually. And a related question, Mike's I had a funny comment, but it actually begs a very important question. Is this because they don't have swag posturepedic beds?
That's a good question.
But really,
And Gandhi studied some of the,
what are the sleeping
kinds of things, too.
conditions like
Walls,
for the
beds.
Chimpanzee? So yeah,
Tell us, Gandhi.
yes, that and sleep efficiency.
Sleep efficiency goes down the longer you spend it in bed. In other words, if you only spent 6 hours in bed, or let's say you only spent 3 hours, chances are almost all of it was spent sleeping. If you spent 6 hours in bed,
Wow.
a larger percentage will have been spent awake. If you spend 12 hours in bed, a very large percentage of that time will have been spent awake. You see this kind of non-linear relationship. So that is exactly correct.
So the longer you spend in bed, the less sleep efficiency you have.
Yeah.
Yes.
So apparently emergency physicians have pretty good sleep efficiency based on a little study that I did.
Yes.
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
have decent sleep efficiency, but poor sleep overall.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember when you were
Yeah.
piloting this stuff and I wore the accelerometer for your pilot. I remember I was, I think, the highest in terms of time in bed, and then I woke up a ton also.
That sounds familiar. You definitely slept a lot more than I did. I think it was like
Yeah.
you sleep like 100 minutes more than I do every night.
Dang.
It was like a
yeah, I
huge-
prioritize
Sleep.
sleep.
I love it to sleep
prioritize
too.
sleep.
I thought I did as well, but apparently that is a questionable thing.
I
What's
probably spend. I go to bed somewhere between like 10 and 11 p.m. and I get up at like 7. So like I'm usually in bed somewhere between 8 and 9 hours every night.
That's good.
So let's do some more of the questions, but I actually have a couple more as well.
And at some point, I want to get to the question, which is, why did sleep evolve?
Yeah.
We
yeah.
really got to.
Well, then I will mention where I was going to go, which is, Gandhi, you're talking a lot about sleep as a behavior.
Yes.
But
Yes.
coming into this, now remember, I'm a physician and not a sleep specialist, but I think of sleep as a biological phenomenon. I mean, in a sense, eating is a behavior, but we don't eat because we're psychologically adapted to eat. We eat because we'll damn die if we don't, right?
It's both.
And both. I mean, they're both elements.
And the same may be true
I'm
of
not
sleep.
saying it's either or. Hardly anything is either or. But I think of sleep as a physiologic necessity with physiologic consequences if we don't sleep. Although I will say I was not able to demonstrate from reading, that is my lit search, doesn't actually validate that we'll die if we don't sleep. There is a thing called familial sleep disorder, which is pretty rare, and people with that do die, but it's a neurologic disorder. So when an ordinary person doesn't sleep, the record is like 11 days, and the kid then slept for like 14 hours and felt okay. So it was a dance contest.
Can I jump in and just mention why it is that we think that that sleep is necessary and lack of sleep is lethal?
Mm.
So there's a study done.
Because otherwise my boss would never let me go home to bed.
Maybe. But there was a study done about 25, 30 years ago that involved rats.
Mhm.
And they kept these rats awake without sleeping. So the problem is that you can't do that without stressing out the rats. And I forget exactly what they did, but they did involve a stressor that prevented the rats from sleeping. Those rats developed little skin boils,
Oof.
and their intestinal microbiota leaked out of their intestine. It then seeded different organs like their liver and their heart. They got little micro abscesses, and they died of sepsis, and they had 100% mortality. So when you hear people say that we need sleep and that sleep loss and lack of sleep is deadly, they're basing it on some of these early rat studies.
Man.
So it's a finding which I think is very interesting because it implicates the gut and these gut microbes,
We
and
like
the fact that we lose control of them and they migrate all over your body and cause problems. So I think that's a meaningful thing. So this is one thing that seems to happen, at least in a mammalian model, that may or may not apply to humans. Humans seem to have a lot more flexibility in dealing with lack of sleep.
Sure. Poor Toad says, if I don't restart my servers, the chance that they will fail increases with time. I guess it is the same with humans.
So definitely cognitive
basically a
deficits
computer.
are demonstrable
Computer.
if we don't
We're
sleep.
a big computer in a ball of goo.
And we should also get into kind of the other, because you kind of touched on this a little bit, Gandhi, but like all the problems that happen to us in our modern lives when we have disordered sleep or lack of sleep, fragmented sleep or short sleep. And it's linked with just a wide variety of health problems. And we may debate whether, the chicken and the egg here, maybe it's the health problem that causes the lack of sleep, but people that simply can't sleep for one reason, if it's work-related or some other thing, they suffer a variety of problems: diabetes, weight gain, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, cancer of breast and prostate and other tissues, marital problems, increased divorce, workplace injury, mood disorders, depression, anxiety, goes on and on and on.
It's a long list.
So,
how about immunosuppression?
Immunosuppression too, yeah. So, but a whole bunch of really bad things happen if we don't get enough sleep.
Absolutely.
So this is medically relevant for those of us that are interested in taking care of patients.
For sure.
And it's relevant to everybody because we all care about sleep.
Yeah, we all want it. We just can't all have it all the time. Let's see.
I think we're back. Yeah, go ahead. You're about to jump in there, Gandhi.
You gave me a couple things there. I apologize if the response is a little bit off the mark because the audio was cutting a little bit. First, you say you think of sleep as a physiological process. You're 100% right. It is. That's why I got into it, is because it's that and its behavior. Eating has a psychological drive as well as a bodily need. But if I could frame it slightly differently, if I were to ask you, how many calories did you burn today with your activity plus your basal metabolic rate? You don't know what it is. It could be 1,857. It could be 2,439. You don't know. But every day you burn a certain number of calories, and it's different every single day. And you also eat every single day, and the amount of calories you eat every single day, you don't know what it is, and it's different from every single day. And yet, over a long period of time, it averages out that those two things are exactly the same, unless you changed weight. So if you stayed the same weight, then somehow, without consciously thinking about it, you balanced it out. I think that there's some intelligence in the body, if you want to phrase it that way. The body knows what the body needs. Be a better way to phrase it.
And this can happen without us being conscious of it. That's
exactly
right.
So all these things are carefully regulated, carefully calibrated. We may or may not have any conscious. We're not necessarily weighing our energy expenditure in this really accurate way.
Right. And I think that sleep works much the same way. If you sleep really well, feeling good the next day, you've got a lot of energy, and the right opportunity presents itself, but it presents itself only at 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, you're not going to want to go to sleep.
Sure.
You're going to want to stay up and pursue that opportunity. Even if it...
So this is getting back to trade-offs.
Yes.
Right, yes.
So we trade off sleep for other fitness-enhancing, presumably, activities.
But this time...
Sex being boinking.
Yes. But where I'm going with this example is...
The medical term is boinking.
Yes.
Right.
We
established this earlier.
Let's say the next day, let's call example one is Friday night at the... Now you've got Saturday night at the... you're not feeling quite so chipper
rocket
because you only slept a couple of hours last night. You've got more opportunities, and you've got the same exact decision. Do you want to stay out late and pursue blinking, or do you want to go home and get some rest?
Right.
It's
That's a legitimate
not all
fitness
that
trade-off.
blinking, Gandhi. I gotta tell you.
Blinking is a
I
metaphor.
don't know what your life is like in Los Angeles.
Blinking
He's in LA.
is a
It is all
metaphor
right.
for bungee
There
jump
could be some other
because it makes the sound
other opportunities.
jumping on trampolines, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Sure.
I got it.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Gosh.
Boink first, then rest.
You're different. Your
Indeed,
decision to
drop
sleep
there.
or not on Friday is different than it is on Saturday. And let's say same thing happens Sunday. Don't sleep well Saturday night. By the time Sunday night comes along, now you're feeling really tired. Do you even want to get up? Do you really want to go out, do things on Sunday afternoon? Or do you want to sleep on the couch, maybe day drink a little and watch TV? I'm trying to make this a relatable anecdote because this is very
Sure.
much what we all kind of experience. By the time Sunday afternoon comes
Day drinking.
around, I don't want to do
Sunday.
anything in particular. I'd rather watch football and drink beer, eat some chicken wings. I don't really want to go out
That's
and
fair.
hike or any of the other activities we've mentioned here. I just want to chill. So
Okay.
in this way, my motivation to do these different activities could be thought of as the outcome, not the driver of my behavior. Because my actual sleep patterns that preceded it have affected my physiology and my physiological state such that at time A, time B, and time C, my need to sleep is different. By the time I get to time C, I have a very high need to sleep, which starts to eclipse my need or desire or motivation, generally speaking, to do anything else. And
The further out you are from your last good sleep cycle, the more the cost-benefit ratio changes in the other direction.
yes, I think that would be fair to say.
And you're also kind of referring to the idea of a sleep deficit.
Yes.
We can draw on that balance of sleep, but at some point we got to pay it back.
That's
Right.
right.
At least in theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
It may not balance out to
There was a
zero.
good question there about some of that Alzheimer's. You said.
Oh yeah. Let me
There's
hold
we got
on to
some
that
good-
one
good
because we
comments
had
here.
the other questions from earlier that I still want to get to. So let's see. I gotta go back farther.
They sleep on beds that are made out of kind of like bamboo shoots that are tied together into a
Is it
flat panel.
Chimane?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sometimes
that we
it could
did have
be
that
as
question.
low as 6 inches off the ground. Sometimes they prop it up with other wood or some elaborate kind of a system so that it could be as high as 2 or 3 feet off the ground, kind of like we would have for a low bed in the United States. And then on top of that, they have another kind of leaf that they split in half and then they weave together in different kinds of patterns. And the curvature of the leaf is maintained by the rigidity of the cellulose. And so I actually think this is really cool. I don't think this is representative of life anywhere else, but it has a springiness to it as a result of
cool.
the shape and these physical properties. So their beds actually,
So they basically have a mattress.
it is analogous
Yeah,
to a mattress. Yeah.
That's very cool.
And even if they
Wow.
put it on the dirt, they still have one of those mats. Always have one of those mats. They are comfortable.
So I heard Charlie Nunn, who's another evolutionary anthropologist who studies sleep. He's made the point that not only do humans get less sleep compared to every other primate that's been looked at when we look at
Oh wow.
kind
I
of a
saw that
comparative
graph.
approach,
Yeah, yeah.
but also humans are the only mammals that make a true bed. That was his argument. That spend as much time into kind of creating a sleeping nest. That's
Chimps do it.
Yeah, I was
But
going to say
it's
apes do.
temporary.
Chimps do it.
They make a new one every night.
But I think I recall from Charlie Nunn saying that we humans, we do it different.
yeah, yeah.
And
We have a
we
permanent.
put more work into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, we do.
Egyptian cotton. You
Yeah.
know.
Gorillas also nest. I think that's
Yeah.
ape trait. Although I don't remember
So
what
apes-
the pattern
apes
is
nest.
for orangutans and gibbons, but I suspect they probably nest as well. David would know about orangutans. That's what he did.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, well, I mean, if you're gonna, it's also a human property that we tend to sleep in the same place every night. Chimps will make a nest every night, but they're never the same nest. If they were to stay in the same nest 2 nights in a row, that same chimp, even if you left everything else about the chimp life the same, might put more effort to making nests. Potentially. Hypothetically.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me that I think that there's 2 things that are counterintuitive, that if people didn't know any better, we wouldn't imagine necessarily that we humans get less sleep than do our closest relatives on the planet. And most people will be surprised by your 2015 research finding that we modern industrialized humans get about equivalent sleep to the extant hunter-gatherer groups that have been studied so far. So both those I think are a little bit surprising and maybe might make us think that we don't need to get quite so much sleep, just in general. And you couple that with your data on the massive variability that you talked about. Maybe we're just hung up on sleep and we don't actually need to worry about it.
Well, I think the fact that we are worried about it is meaningful information. Just like I think it's meaningful information that we're all worried about it and we still don't sleep enough. You know?
That's true.
You know, if you ask a room full of people to raise your hand if you slept well last night, you know, not everyone will raise their hand. And this is what I do with undergrads because it makes the point very easily. And then I ask as a follow-up question, don't you guys know that sleep is important? And I'll list a subset of the negative consequences that Joe listed about what happens when you don't sleep enough. And everyone will say like, yeah, I knew that. And it's like, well, why didn't you sleep enough last night then? I mean, there's this disconnect. You know that the consequences are there, but you don't sleep enough anyway. I think that's meaningful. You know, I think that
well, it's kind of like you were saying, we know we shouldn't eat junk food, and yet we do it anyway.
Right. There's a very strong drive.
Just knowledge may be power, but it may not be so powerful enough that it can make us avoid some bad behavior.
Sure. And I mean, every time we're weighing our choices, right? Should I have another beer because it's going to bring me some amount of joy or better enjoyment of the football game I'm watching, or am I gonna try and not drink those calories? Or you know, like every time you make a choice, you're weighing those sorts of decisions.
It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
But listen, you know, so I guess I posed this question earlier, and we can get to the comments here in a bit. But Gandhi, why do you think that sleep evolved in general on this planet?
Yes. So that's actually, before I let you answer, that's very related to the question that I've been holding on to for a while. That Luna Deer said, the idea of sleep seems a bit counterintuitive in the sense of a hunt or be hunted world. We know that sleep is important for us, though. Do we have any idea why animals started to sleep? So
lots of people have made that exact point.
So it's a paradox. Seems like we could be doing other useful activities.
Potentially.
Be it blinking or eating or
trying not to die.
Trying to avoid predators.
Yeah.
So that could be part of the answer.
Did I tell you my family's Latin motto, Conorissimus non morir?
No.
Do your best not to die.
There you go. Oh, yes, you did tell us that. Yes, I remember that. Yes. That's a great motto.
Coffee is full of very
words to live by.
That's right.
Useful words to live by.
Yeah.
Well, I think that before you would have had sleep, you would have had single-celled organisms that their chemical reactions that constitute their metabolic activity would be happening at a higher rate when the energy of the sun is shining on them than at night. It's not. I think that would have...
This has to do with sort of the evolution of a circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So, of which sleep is a component.
Sure.
Right. So if you start off with that as your baseline, you've got a circadian pattern of metabolic activity, and then you've got more complex organisms that follow. This is the context in which sleep would have evolved. You're not going to be very active during this period anyway. What can you do to make the most of your time? And there are a lot of benefits of sleep that we certainly know what happens when you don't get them. A lot of popular ideas are memory consolidation or clearing of metabolic waste from the brain, immunoactivity, there appears to be a lot of
housekeeping behaviors.
housekeeping
Yeah,
behaviors,
brain
generally
Cleanup,
maintenance,
shoveling out the garbage in the cell.
maintenance of the body. If these are things that can be done more efficiently when you're not using those same tissues, which seems like a reasonable hypothesis to me, perhaps it would be more efficient to do those things at night when you're not doing anything else than trying to do them during the daytime when it interferes with your other activities. And so you start getting this kind of bimodality of your metabolic activity, where you start concentrating these kinds of activities into the period of the day when you're not doing anything else. And so
do you think that's enough to explain the whole thing? Because I mean, I agree with you that certainly when we are not using our brains for other functions, that's a good time to do a little bit of cleanup, memory consolidation, etc. That we could focus on some maintenance functions when we're not running around in the, tropical rainforest or the, African savanna, something like that. So that makes sense to me. It's not clear to me that is the reason for the unconsciousness that accompanies sleep. So why are we so vulnerable?
And on that, so we were poikilotherms before we were homotherms. So, we had to respond to temperature changes by having a circadian change in our metabolism. All of that makes sense. But there are large mammals that are nocturnal and large mammals that are diurnal. So either one is compatible with being a large homothermic vertebrate.
Sure.
So why didn't we just evolve so that we could be both nocturnal and diurnal, and then we could look for food 24 hours a day and do the other active things we do and be on guard against predators and so forth? There's a huge opportunity cost to sleep. Even if it existed because at one time we were cold-blooded, you'd think we could evolve our way back out of it by this time. Also, fish sleep. And fish live in a much more stable environment. There aren't the same day-night rhythms deep under the water that there are on land.
Cave fish and super deep, in the Marianas Trench, those kinds of organisms, do they sleep?
Fish in general sleep, but I don't know about the super deep sea fish or cave fish.
Or do you have to have this diurnal input of sunlight to drive the whole thing? I really wonder about that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I disagree, because your story is the most coherent one floating around, but you see that there are these things that don't quite fit that model.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's certainly more complex than presenting it more in terms of the context of which the first thing that you might call sleep would have evolved. You get into a question of what is sleep, and it becomes very complicated because it doesn't look the same in every species, and it's very difficult to come up with one
point
definition.
I was going to make earlier,
if dolphins never stop moving, are they ever sleeping? Well, if they have a certain brain activity pattern, does that mean that they're sleeping? If it's the brain activity pattern, that means they're sleeping. But you can see that in a person who's, if you ask them, are you asleep? And they say no, is it still sleeping? There's not clear-cut answers to these things. There is actually instances where if you are measuring someone's brain activity, human being, and you ask them, are you asleep? They will say no, but their brain waves will tell you that they're in stage 1 sleep. That can happen.
That's most of the time for me.
That's crazy.
So
really crazy.
It's very difficult. Now, in terms of the opportunity costs of sleep, why you should be unconscious, there's an assumption in that question that there's something better you could be doing. That is a strong assumption. I've made this point, but also Charlie Nunn and David Sampson.
Elon Musk and the other titans of Silicon Valley, they seem to think that there's some utility in not sleeping.
Right.
And I did illustrate examples of what I meant by the opportunities that are lost. So I'm not just inferring there is something out there.
No,
I was more specific than that.
Right.
Absolutely. But if I were to talk about chimps versus humans specifically, why doesn't a chimpanzee want to spend more time awake? Well, chimpanzees nest in trees. That's where they sleep. And it just so happens that moving around inside a tree in the dark is difficult and even dangerous. And the risks of falling out of a tree are substantial injury that potentially could be life-threatening. So maybe it's not such a great idea to get up and walk around if you're a chimp at night. You have to really have some good reason to do it.
Let's show the second slide.
But if you're sleeping on the ground, that risk is not there. Now, falling is not the only risk. You have nocturnal hunters versus diurnal hunters and things of that nature. And it gets very complicated. But my point is that just because you could be theoretically doing something better with your time doesn't mean you could actually be doing something better with your time.
Sure.
And your point about chimpanzees kind of made me think about this. This is Mike Birbiglia, this slide here. He's got a kind of famous monologue called Sleepwalking. And he talks about a time where he was fast asleep, but he got up out of bed. He was having some crazy dream, and he jumped through a plate glass window of his hotel room at a La Quinta Inn somewhere.
That's terrifying.
And just injured the crap out of himself, and just had all these lacerations. And he's had several episodes like this, where he resorted to putting himself into a mummy sleeping bag and zipping it all the way up so he couldn't actually move. But it shows, so this would be the benefit of being paralyzed while you're asleep.
Yes.
Right? So you don't do something like this and injure yourself in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
For people that haven't watched or heard Mike Birbiglia, he is hilarious.
He's pretty funny.
And this monologue is fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's a very good counterexample to the argument of, if I could sleepwalk, I could easily get in my 60 minutes of exercise every day without changing anything else in my life.
Yeah,
Now,
right?
You could get 60 minutes of exercise, but you could also wake up on the ground out with broken glass all around you. Is that what you want? That's part of the risk.
Trade-offs.
You gotta it's can't have one without the other. There's always that risk.
Yeah.
Right. So interestingly, sleep is the only sedentary activity which is good for you metabolically. So people that get a decent amount of actual sleep, it is sedentary or not moving, those people are healthier metabolically than people that get less sleep, relatively.
Right.
This is based on North American epidemiologic studies. Whereas other kinds of sedentary behaviors, like sitting on a couch, not so good for you.
Not so much.
That's true, but
go ahead.
There's always a but.
If you look at the health outcomes as a function of sleep duration, people who sleep longer than average also have bad health outcomes. That, in fact,
There's
it's
Too much is too much.
It's-
Too little is too little.
it's
Just right is
nearly
just right.
symmetrical.
There, yeah.
In fact, it's like they call it a U shape. So if you're sleeping 10 hours
Just
per
do the
night,
U-shape again for us. Okay.
that may not be such a good
Ooh,
thing.
I
Now,
kind of like that.
are people sleeping longer because they're unwell, or are they unwell because they're sleeping longer? It's a less
you go.
Chicken and the
It's
egg.
a less
That's right.
obvious
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
It's a less obvious answer than when you're asking that about short sleep. But
Right, but certainly if you're dying of tuberculosis or metastatic cancer, you're going to spend a lot of time in bed.
Yep.
And you probably would report having had more sleep.
or if you put opportunity costs in a more dramatic language, you have no reason to get out of bed, nothing to live for, then you end up sleeping longer, and you also end up being more likely to die.
True?
You
That's a
sound
good
so
point.
happy about
I know.
that.
It's about as
why are you
dramatic and
smiling?
exaggerated as I can think of, but it gets the
Yeah.
point across.
Yeah, for sure.
Or you
Um,
feel that way. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
you see patterns with depression and unemployment that mirror the situation because it may be interpreted that that's the situation. It may not actually
But,
be
yeah.
the case, and that's why we call it
But
pathology.
I love your emphasis on trade-offs and opportunity costs. It also kind of brings into sharp relief why it is that babies spend so much time sleeping,
Sure.
and also why neonates are so muscularly, uncoordinated, like can't get up and run around and hurt themselves, because it wouldn't be useful for them to expend energy in that way, and in fact it would hurt them.
That's a great point.
So really, their time is best spent digesting,
Right.
feeding when they're awake, or maybe even sleeping while they're feeding. They may be an example of a life stage where you can't actually accomplish that, and spending all their time in terms of maintenance and growth,
They can
and
also
nothing else.
breathe and swallow at the same time, which is not something that adults can do.
Jeez, babies are amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And spend the rest of the evening trying to do that.
Please don't choke.
Let's give it a go.
So going back to the productivity thing here. So we're talking about sleep as an activity that is potentially something that is preventing us from doing something else. We've talked about it in terms of chimps, theoretically to try and give us some idea of what our evolutionary environment might have looked like. But for humans today, it's very different. So we might be like Elon Musk, and we're thinking that if we sleep only 4 hours a night, we can spend those other 4 hours trying to get us to Mars or whatever it is. So there's this very real sort of work side of this that pertains to this trade-off. And so related to that, we can certainly thinking about it evolutionarily is kind of the crux of this discussion, certainly. But if we were to sort of speculate in terms of our modern human lifestyle, Nico Damas is asking, and this is from a little bit ago, but related to the productivity piece, since or if sleeping encourages maintaining recently acquired memories, wouldn't that potentially suggest that animals that focus on sleep in some way might retain more of their recently acquired memories, behaviors, learned behaviors, those kinds of things?
In the case of rats, you can impair their learning by impairing their sleep.
Sure.
But it doesn't appear to me that the pattern is that animals who sleep more learn more. It doesn't seem like it's that straightforward.
I would agree.
But when you're to your question about the all-nighter, that has been looked at, and I think that the general advice for students in the audience is that you're probably best off not staying up all night before the big test, because that time is better spent accomplishing some memory consolidation.
As an absolutely fanatic educator, I very strongly counsel against pulling all-nighters before tests and stuff. Cramming is a great way to make sure that you're one of those people who eventually gets a degree and then years later says, I went to 4 years of college and learned nothing. And that's probably true. They probably did learn nothing whatsoever.
I spent my entire college career cramming.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
I remember nothing. Just kidding.
Fun fact. I have never pulled an all-nighter.
Nor have I.
Ever.
I do all my work gradually through the course of the
And I don't think, I'm not quite as good of a planner as Coffee, but I learned early on that staying up all night was counterproductive for me.
Yeah, I just
buckets
can't
of evidence show that cramming is a horrible strategy. How did you ever get through medical school anyway? How'd you wind up smarter than me anyway? Just imagine what he'd have been like if he had good hygiene.
Right. Hygiene is that's my problem. Among others.
On that note, we have another question.
It's a good thing his mother didn't hear him say that.
To answer the original question, these studies suggest that if individual A has sleep impaired, their memory consolidation is reduced. At a species level, you're very far removed. You know, a human that can walk on 2 legs all the time will do very well, but a chimp that does the same thing may not do so well. So elephants, which are known to never forget, in the wild, they may only sleep an average of 2 to 4 hours per night.
Wow.
Yes.
Crazy.
How many leaves do you think you have to eat to have an elephant-sized body?
Or an elephant-sized bowel movement.
Yeah. There's a lot of leaves. It probably takes more than 12 hours a day to eat that many leaves.
They probably stay up awake all night going, oh God, oh God, oh God, I'm going to have to pass all that hay sooner or later.
but really, Gandhi, I think that there's a really important point I think that you're getting to, which is what can we learn from some of these comparative comparisons that teach us about the function of sleep. And I think that, and you've done a little bit of this just in humans, so not really a comparative study, but looking at seasonality, temperature, thermoregulation, energy, homeostasis. What can you tell us about that in sleep?
Well, to make things even more complicated, what we found was that in 2 separate populations, both the San and the Chimpanzee, these are the only 2 populations we had the data to do this test, the average sleep duration in the summer and the winter was a full hour apart. The same people.
Wow.
So same people, same population, sleep duration changes quite dramatically over the season, and that is in favor of sleeping longer during seasons when it's colder, right? In the winter.
When it's darker
so that tells
for
us
longer.
Something about that cost-benefit trade-offs.
Hours.
Maybe it's less useful to be out and about when there's less light and less heat.
Presumably less food together as well.
Food.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that whole cost balancing shifts, and that seasonal effect tells us something I think very important about sleep. At least one part of it.
Yeah. it means something. I think
Right.
it's a pretty big difference to be a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, right.
What does it mean? We'll have to find out. It could be opportunity costs. It could be that you don't want to lose as much heat by being active when it's cold. It could be both.
Yeah.
But these are not mutually exclusive explanations.
Right.
I do think that you're right, that there probably isn't a single answer as to why organisms on planet Earth sleep. That it is a complicated question. And of course, your answer is spoken like a true scientist. There's all these unanswered questions, reasons for more funding. Got to get that.
Future research.
Future research. More study is needed.
That's right. It's a bit of a trope, but it's also kind of true.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
No, I'm really proud of the work that you've done, Gandhi, and I think that it's very exciting. And I'm looking forward to see how your career continues. You're really onto something here.
I hope so.
Not that we're wrapping things up here. We're only getting started.
No, yeah.
Hopefully.
We have another question from Pime. Has anyone studied about humans having issues with sleeping because we are taking ourselves out of a regular mammalian state, potentially of being vulnerable and having your senses heightened to danger, whereas humans have a room, a bed, a quilt, dull down their mammalian survival instinct? Do we know anything? I mean, I guess these comparative studies between species might get at this a little bit.
So yeah, we are presumably, most of us in our homes are safe when we go to bed.
Right.
We're not going to be preyed upon.
We're in Albuquerque, right?
I know. but Gandhi's actually studied this. He studied dwellings and whether people have walls and how that affects sleep, which kind of gets at this question, right?
Yes. So feeling safe and being safe is not the same. Now, I looked at within the Chimane population. Some people have houses where it's basically 4 poles and a roof. That's it. And other people put in a lot of time and effort. They tie these bamboo shoots together and they make walls all the way around their house. These walls don't keep out the bugs. They don't insulate temperature. They don't insulate noise. They give you privacy, and they make sure that nothing can wander into your house.
Is it windy in Amazonian Bolivia? Like, is it providing any protection from the elements? If it doesn't protect you from bugs or from temperature?
No, I didn't test for wind, so I can't say that definitively. But I suspect that it makes a small difference.
Yeah.
Because it's still pretty drafty.
Even if the ambient temperature wasn't, we lose heat to the environment,
right?
And we lose more heat via convection if there's wind,
right?
So you can imagine the protection from wind might give you some benefit, but that's of course is a tropical environment, and that may not be all that.
That's also true. But that notwithstanding, you would expect that maybe it doesn't make much difference in sleep, but there actually is a significant difference in sleep. These two houses, and the difference is people who have walls have higher sleep efficiency.
Okay, so not absolute hours, but
their sleep duration is the same, but it actually ends up being more variable from night to night. It gets even more complicated. So if
they put more in the bank, maybe.
That's how I think. If you don't have walls on your house, and you suspect that you have a more unpredictable environment, a greater risk that you're going to have sleep interruption, lose sleep because of it, you go to bed earlier and at a more consistent time, so that if anything happens, you wake up, you deal with it, you go back to sleep, you still get the right amount of sleep that you need.
Now, you mentioned that Americans run about 85% sleep efficiency, or first worlders, I'll say. Did the Chimay run higher or lower than that?
Don't remember the exact numbers. It's not far off of 85. I don't know that the average in the U.S. is 85 either. I just know that that's a cutoff between healthy and unhealthy.
Oh, okay, all right.
The average.
So what I was getting at is, with that hypothesis that you're beating around, it would suggest that with our far more secure walls and greater privacy and so forth, that we would have a higher sleep efficiency because we're less expecting to be awakened and have to go deal with something in the middle of the night. It still happens, but less of it.
We're just less vulnerable to predators.
To rephrase that, I think that if a Chimpanzee has walls, if a Chimpanzee person has walls, and that makes them go to bed later because they know that they have a less unpredictable environment and they can still sleep enough, even if they stay up late, take that to the extreme. Don't make that bamboo walls, make that a regular, wood and sheetrock and insulation wall that's quiet and everything else. Now you've got almost no unpredictability in your sleeping space. What do you expect? What would you predict would the effect on sleep would be? Well, you're probably going to stay up as late as you possibly can and try to push that sleep efficiency as close to 100% as you can get it. How do you do that?
Right.
Spend less time in bed and end up sleeping less. And then what happens if you pushed it too far? You have very high sleep efficiency, but you also have short sleep, and you start to feel like you didn't get enough. You start feeling tired. That's kind of how I suspect is a large component of why we're all interested in sleep, why we all care about it, and yet don't get enough.
Because we're pushing it right up to the limit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're playing chicken with it.
And again, we're assuming that most of us have a relatively stable home environment, and a stable home.
Right.
And one that's not falling apart. That may not be true in, say, Puerto Rico right now. Certainly in Albuquerque, there are plenty of people right here in this town who don't have a stable home environment, who could be beaten up or worse. And we know that affects sleep too.
Absolutely.
In the direction that I think that your model would predict.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A couple of questions here, and they're like sort of related. So Flo and Prose is asking, are the Chimpanzee with walls more wealthy or whatever equivalent to that? Seems like there may be a confounding variable there, that the people who have the luxury of time or whatever it may, or perhaps money probably, to build walls may be more secure in general.
This is a really great question.
Great question.
Very insightful.
And then related to that, just not necessarily the confounding part of it, but the walls and all of these different sleep conditions. Nicodemus asked earlier, lots of these changes have happened over such short time scales relative to the changes over which biology would actually change and then affect behavior. Yes, no? What do we think about those kinds of things related to how different sleep conditions might actually change behaviors?
Well,
and thus trade-offs.
Right. Part A is when you build a house out of organic materials in the tropics, it's going to degrade. And they have to rebuild their houses, they told me, is approximately once every 5 years. I had about 77% of my sample had walls, which lines up pretty closely with that. So it may just be a function. I don't have definitive evidence for this, but it is an interesting coincidence, and it may be a product of these same people will have walls, but they didn't have them yet. There's no other dimension, not age, no measures of wealth, not number of kids, nothing that I was able to check significantly correlated with walls to speak to the difference in economic status being a driver of the sleep patterns. To the degree that these trade-offs could be shifted in the United States or elsewhere, certainly if you could get by on 5 hours of sleep a night and feel great, you'd want to do that. I would want to do that.
Right.
What are the selective pressures that would possibly allow for that to happen? Whoever has the mutations, their metabolism, not just in their brain, but in their liver, in their blood, and in all of their tissues, they have adaptations that can function sufficiently on 5 hours of sleep. If all of those mutations came and the people who had those mutations had more children, didn't, then very slowly over hundreds of thousands of years of having a modern post-industrial economy, you could have evolution towards sleeping 5 hours per night.
So we might see those changes, at least in theory.
If you're optimistic about
future human
economics in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, under current timescales, we haven't undergone that many generations where we even expect to see selection for a change in our sleeping habits.
I think that would favor that.
Yeah.
Sorry, are you guys going to freak out if I mention Stephen Jay Gould's punctate evolution? I know it's controversial.
Freaking out right now.
You guys can handle it.
I'm triggered.
All right. So if that's
actually have
the
no problem
thing,
with
and
fluctuating
his evidence for
equilibrium.
it does seem credible to me, then the very rapid changes of the Industrial Revolution, this would be a time when such a thing might occur. But arguing in the other direction is the fact that nearly every human being alive can reproduce now because we've so thoroughly kicked nature's ass. All of us get reproductive opportunities now.
Not all of us.
Nearly.
Yeah.
No,
you really
those-
have to fall far
those
through the
with
cracks.
resources.
No, infants still die, even in places that are industrialized.
Is it-
Compare it
We
to,
see-
say, Victorian
we
times or something
Yeah,
we
like
see
that.
variability both in survival and certainly in reproduction. So I would disagree with your premise.
So you
that
do
we're
not
all
agree that there's
the
less
same.
selective pressure now than there was 100 years ago, or 200 or 500,
No, there's different selective pressure.
but not less.
I guess
There's 8 billion of us.
I'm
I would
gonna-
argue we're pretty good at staying alive.
depends.
And,
It
what
depends
people have
on
argued.
context.
What people have argued is in fact
and
that
all 8 billion of
evolution
us
is
like to
speeding
boink,
up.
which means trampolines.
Evolution is from if you look at rates of evolution, the fact that there are so many humans on the planet right now, and there certainly is variation in both in reproduction, modern medicine notwithstanding, there's variation certainly in survival and lots of infectious selection happening right now. That in fact, selection speed and evolution is actually speeding up. We see more rapid genetic change now than we have
Because we have
at any
more
other stage.
variability
Just
that can
because-
respond. But I think punctate evolution
But
requires intense
mortality
selective
rates
pressure.
are much lower. That is totally true.
Keep in mind, if you've got evolution and natural selection, the same thing. Genetic drift, migration, and mutation are also components of evolution. If you have a larger population of the species on the planet, that allows for more mutation happening on the planet per year. We also have more migration than ever in species history. We also, if we have 2 kids instead of 9, that means that drift is going to be a larger component of phenotypic
We get
outcomes.
more of all these things.
So
I'm talking more about directionality. You're right, there's a lot that's involved in evolution, but if we're trying to speculate that our sleep patterns would change in an evolutionarily meaningful way because we live in this different environment now than the one that we evolved into, then there needs to be enough selective pressure if we want to say that that could happen faster than 100,000 or 500,000 years. And I think it could, because when we selectively breed animals, for example, we can change them in several generations. Foxes went from totally unable to tolerate humans to pet breeds in well under 50 generations of foxes. So evolution can happen fast, but it requires intense and directional selective pressure, I would have said.
I think it's absolutely theoretically possible. I'm skeptical of its practical the other 3 forces of evolution are very much ramped up more than in species history. If natural selection is not ramped up to the same degree, then as a relative influence on future genotype proportions, natural selection is actually probably, in my opinion, weaker now than it would have been before. So evolution could be stronger while natural selection is weaker.
Right.
That's my personal opinion.
So
I don't have
let's break that down actually a little bit, because so we are contrasting natural selection from the other 3 sort of driving forces of evolution. So let's break down those other 3. The first one I'll take gene flow, which I would say we have more of than ever these days, certainly. But there are 2 others.
If you look at drift is anything that can happen by random chance. You've got, let's say for any given locus in the genome, we'll pretend
What's a locus, Gandhi?
A locus is a single base pair in DNA where there is a difference. One person could have an A at that step in the ladder, and another person could have a C. And the outcome could be blue eyes or brown eyes. And you inherit one of these from one parent and from the other parent. And you expect on average that for a couple with blue and brown eyes that you're going to have 25% blue eyes, or no, let's say 50-50. All right, this is a bad example already. It's more complicated than I wanted it to be. Let's say you've got white flowers and red flowers. You mix the two together, you get pink flowers.
Bring it back to Mendel.
Yes.
I love a Punnett
Well,
square.
let's go back to
That's
Mendel.
right.
It's because the pink flowers have one pink allele, they have one white allele and one red allele. So they're both expressed. You mix white and red, you get pink. So if you have these two flowers, one white and one red, and you breed them, and you have 16 flowers come out of it, you expect you might have approximately, they're either all going to be pink, or you're going to see half and half or some kind of normal distribution, right? And the more offspring there are, the closer to a normal distribution there's going to be. You know, the Punnett square example still being pretty weak. I hope the normal distribution makes sense. The more N you have, the more normal that curve will look. So if you're a Chimpanzee environment and you have 9 kids, you're going to get pretty close, or at least you're going to get a lot closer to the expected distribution of phenotypes within a household than when you only have 2 kids or even 1 kid. If you've only got 1 kid, and you've got some kind of random chance, there's only 1%.
So this is an argument for having lots of kids.
It could be. If you've got a 1% chance of having a certain outcome, let's say the super genius telekinesis gene, a 1% chance, and you have 1 kid, and that kid gets it, 100% of the offspring from that family have telekinesis powers. Conversely, if you have 99% of the genes say you're going to be perfectly healthy and normal, you could still, and you only have 1 kid, that 1 kid could still end up having a lot of severe problems. So that's what drift refers to, is this kind of stochastic nature of inheritance and randomness. And when you have smaller family size, randomness is a larger influence on outcome than when you have a larger family size. And so because we have lower fertility now than we used to, randomness is becoming more of an issue.
Yeah, although I wouldn't have said family size, but simply total numbers, because remember, each family is rolling a separate dice. Each of those D100s has a chance of coming up 1, but all the family are rolling separate dice. So if you have 20 families, you're still going to roll 20 dice.
Well, that's true.
Or one family with 20 kids, you're still rolling 20 dice.
Well, that's true, but if you're going to be looking at the average of 2 dice, and then if it's below 3, you take those dice and you throw them in the garbage, you're not rolling 20 dice. You're rolling 2 dice 10 times, and that's not the same. So that's where the randomness comes into it. So even though we have a larger population on the planet than we used to, randomness can still be a larger influence than it would have been before.
So, and listen, these probabilities, thinking about what is drift and potentially random versus some fingerprint and evidence for selection on these traits and natural selection driving what we see with sleep and sleep patterns. I think these are really, really valuable things to think about. To me, though, one of the driving ideas when it comes to sleep, and certainly modernity in us, is this idea that many sleep behaviors we can imagine were or are adaptive in an evolutionary context. That we don't exhibit the variation in this trait that's completely random. So the seasonality effects or the effects on temperature, other influences that Gandhi has shown so well in his research. That I'm suggesting that those things are not probably random. That in fact these are evidence of selection. And if that's the case, then we can imagine that some of the things that we do, kind of bring it back to the original idea that we are mismatched to our current sleep regime and our current environment. So the things that regulate our sleep and the genetic effects that kind of play into our circadian rhythm, these get dysregulated or messed up when we're exposed to different light wavelengths. Absolutely. Or different exposures, like from a cell phone and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And another thing we have touched on this a little bit, but of course I'm really interested in the microbiome And the research that I've done has been on what happens to night shift workers. So the ER docs that stay up all night, how do they exhibit, or do they exhibit problems?
Right.
And we know from nurses that there's been lots of studies of night shift workers in hospitals, and nurses in particular. We see a pretty remarkable weight gain with numbers of years worked in a night shift environment. So weight gain, metabolism is plugged into sleep, and probably the abnormal exposure of staying up all night is both a circadian stress that messes us up.
Or is it behavioral and cultural? Because during the night shift, you're not surrounded by the conventional world, and so you can indulge in behaviors somebody might raise an eyebrow at if you were in a more, in the regular working daytime. You give yourself permission.
It could be both. I actually looked at an abstract earlier today. That's not as useful as the one I read a long time ago. Irrelevant for you. So if you look at sleep deprivation, you let people eat whatever they want. People who are sleep deprived are more likely to want to eat snack kind of, like chips or cookies.
So your eating behavior actually changes.
Right.
You prioritize energy-dense, high-fat, high-carbohydrate foods.
So their priority.
You're not going to go after the bell pepper or the bean sprouts. You're going to want to go after the Krispy Kreme.
The priorities.
This has actually been shown.
So what does that mean that the priorities change? Why would their preferences change? That may be reflective of something else. And so these are not mutually exclusive explanations that the two of you are offering.
Right.
They're both quite good and both quite plausible.
So eating behavior is part of it. It's also been shown that people that work overnight tend to exercise less in their subsequent day. So activity patterns change. So it almost seems like once you stay up all night, the way that I look at this is that it's a stress. It's a stress on your body. And of course you are incurring a sleep deficit because night shift workers, even if you do it on a regular schedule, it's been shown they get fewer hours of sleep per night compared to people that work during the day. So your body does change, and you do prioritize these sometimes what we consider unhealthy foods, and also people don't exercise as much as they should. So of course this is going to be related to some lifestyle problems.
Right.
We're going to see changes in obesity and diabetes. We're going to see all the inflammatory complications that go along with that, including maybe cancer.
And these consequences appear to be true even for people who self-identify as owls rather than larks, meaning they would say, no, my natural rhythm is to go to bed at 2 a.m. and get up at noon, which is actually a reasonable sleep rhythm. And, well, it'd be a little long, but you take my point. So they would self-identify and say, this is my natural rhythm, this is what I prefer, this is how I'm more comfortable, yet they still show some of the signs of a disordered circadian cycle compared to the larks who don't like being up late at night, even if they sometimes can do it.
Gandhi, have you looked for owls and larks in a hunter-gatherer, hunter-horticulturalist population?
Yes, I have. And I looked at the same exact figure as a colleague, and I interpreted it as meaning there's no owls and larks in this population. He interpreted it as meaning, wow, there's more owls and larks in this population than any I've ever seen before.
What?
Well, they can't be more than 100%.
Yeah.
Well, the reason
so
that
we look at the same data and come to different conclusions?
Yes.
Can't believe it.
The reason
Imagine
for that is because I sorted their sleep patterns on a single graph, and instead of seeing a bimodal distribution where some would look like owls and some look like larks, it was a normal distribution.
You saw a continuum.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
The reason he thought it was more extreme is because the
He divided
ends,
them
the two
into two
tails
clubs.
were way longer than he had ever seen before. People on the extremes were much more extreme.
Because some people have argued that in a, say, traditional evolutionarily relevant environment, it would be useful for a family group to have people with some variation in sleep patterns, because that would be protective against large predators, other aggressive humans that might be in the neighborhood, and these kinds of things. So people have, armchair speculated about those. That might be useful. I don't think that we have any evidence to support that idea.
What about larks versus owls and IQ. I know I've seen some things, and some people in chat are bringing this up as well. That
Yes.
there have been some studies that show that people who go to bed later have higher IQs.
But people that go to bed later also have more depression.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a correlation issue that maybe it's not necessarily going to bed later that's driving the higher IQ, but there's some other confounding variable there.
Or maybe people who have higher IQ go to bed later.
Right. Absolutely.
On average.
I'm not aware of the IQ
On
data.
average, yes.
Which means that there's plenty of high IQ people who go to bed early as well.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's very difficult to make the distinction.
I'm definitely more of an owl, but I wish I was a lark.
Yeah, I'm a lark for sure.
Well, our job makes us that way. I mean, almost all the jobs I had all my life were nighttime jobs. I worked graveyard all the way through high school.
Yeah.
Practically every job I had was a night or evening
I
job.
could do it.
And the current job I have now is a regular daytime kind of job. And I have to say, my body still prefers that. After all those years of working mostly nights, I still prefer the daytime.
It's better for you. We've evolved on a planet with a 24-hour diurnal cycle, and that's how I think that we respond best.
This may be me just highlighting my own preference for variability, but this time last year, I used to wake up between 7 and 9, and now I usually wake up between 6 and 7. It's the same person.
Hang on.
I can set my own work schedule.
We lost you.
We're having some
activity
problems.
You look real good.
Oh, Gandhi! You're frozen. Hang on.
We were frozen Gandhi.
Yeah. Oh,
no.
Oh, there we go. Hang on. We had a robot. Let me restart. I'll recall here. Hang on 1 second, guys.
Let's talk about Gandhi.
The disappearing Gandhi.
Let's see. Let's see if it works.
Actually, quite glad to be introduced to this guy. He's really sharp and interesting.
Yeah. He's one of my best friends. You're back.
He's back.
You're back.
Look good.
Can you hear us? Okay. All right. You were a robot with a silly face.
Yes.
It was pretty fun.
And also the freeze frame was bad.
Yes, it was quite good.
I was just saying that I can set my own work schedule, and that has been this true for many years. And when I lived in Albuquerque, I woke up between 8 and 10. And last year I was waking up between 7 and 9, and now I wake up between 6 and 7. There's nothing that's really changed other than me being older, which maybe
you're also moving, but you're moving west.
It could be the West. It could be that it's just age, and so by the time I'm 35, I'm going to be waking up at 3 a.m., and by the time I'm 40, I'm going to be waking up at 11 p.m. You know, I'll circle around by the time I get to senescence, but somehow I doubt that. So what do you make of these preferences in owls and larks? I mean, I don't know. I think that they're very descriptive terms that are reflective of something, but I don't think that they are I'm not convinced that they're evolutionary strategies to be an owl or a lark for your whole life in the way that like a Mendelian trait could predispose you to one or the other. I'm not convinced.
No, it's interesting that you have data showing sort of a smooth, continuous distribution of that trait. Which is interesting. At least in the work that I've been doing and studying my emergency medicine colleagues who stay up all night, I've asked people, are you a lark or are you an owl? And I asked them, how well are you able to deal with working night shifts? So I would be on one tail of that and say that I'm not really able to work them well at all. Some people actually prefer them and think it's no problem at all. So we see variation even in our own group of colleagues who work in the emergency room. We see some of these trait distributions.
I was actually both. I'm very much a lark. Left to my own devices, I get up at sometime between 3 and 4:30 in the morning.
What?
And that's without an alarm clock or anything. That's my preference. Yet, when I did most of my working life at night, I liked the night shift for a variety of other reasons, partly because I like to work too.
Yeah.
And so I was perfectly happy working night shift, but not on the grounds of when I slept. That one aspect of it was part of the price, but it was a small price in comparison to what I felt the rewards were.
Trade-offs.
Yeah.
So how many hours do you both typically get on average?
When I took some time off and I could sleep anytime I wanted, I would go to bed about 10 and get up at 3, and then I'd take a nap in the late morning. And so I got about 6 hours a day if left them completely to my own devices, but in 2 bites. Yeah. And I don't know why. That just felt right, you know.
Maybe that's your first and second sleep, I
right.
suppose.
I would say for me, 7.5 to 8 hours.
Yeah. I typically feel better when I get about 7.5, but I'm in bed way too long. I'm realizing this, that I probably would have better sleep efficiency if I spent less time in bed.
We don't know
Once
that
in a
better
great
sleep
while, like
efficiency.
3 or 4 times a year, I'll sleep until 8.
Yeah.
Gandhi's going to say that better sleep efficiency.
We don't know that higher sleep efficiency is better. The term efficiency is loaded and it's not very objective.
Yeah, totally.
Because you can look at sleep quality. So
it's a really good
in the
point,
limited data that I have using actigraphy on my ER doctors in their natural habitat, not unlike what Gandhi did with the Chimpanzee in their natural habitat, is that we found that emergency physicians have pretty good sleep efficiency but poor sleep quality with lots of interruptions and fragmented sleep. So the worker that helped me do this, he said it was similar to what he sees with underprivileged kids who have a lot of disruption in the family, violence and aggression exposures. So it kind of makes sense that we ER docs live sort of a kind of a stressful life.
Did you correlate cortisol levels with that?
So here's actually maybe we can kind of wrap things up or get close to this a little bit because we are getting a little late. But I did want to take advantage of having all these smart people on this call with me to talk about kind of what we're going to be doing with my current study. So the hypothesis is we've been gathering all these saliva samples over shifts and days and nights from ER doctors, and the idea is that we know that the microbiome also has a circadian rhythm, as do we. So our brains have a circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycles have a circadian rhythm, most of the gene expression in our body exhibits this 24-hour cycle, and so does our microbiome. The microbes exhibit changes that oscillate over a 24-hour cycle, and this is true both in your gut and also in your mouth. So we wanted to measure these mouth microbes in the saliva and see if we can find any patterns that happens in shift workers. So one, do those oscillations get abolished by shift work? Do night shift workers have a dysbiosis and sort of messed up salivary microbiome? And is it also mismatched with the normal pattern of cortisol? So stress hormones like cortisol show a very, very dramatic circadian pattern. It peaks right about when you wake up, and then it goes down, and then when you go to sleep, it kind of ramps back up again.
Interesting.
So interesting, there are microbe populations that show almost the exact same pattern. That could be a coincidence, or it could be actually the cortisol that's driving some of these things.
That's really
cortisol would raise blood glucose.
And it could do that too. I also talked to Ben Trumbull, who Gandhi knows, you guys know.
Yep.
Smart guy, interested in testosterone too. And testosterone, of course, male sex hormone, also drives immunity. So like cortisol, has a potential to influence the microbes in our bodies. So we're going to look at that. But my basic idea or hypothesis, I think it's really kind of making me kind of excited about this research, is the idea that not only are our bodies mismatched for our current regime of staying up all night and working bizarre shifts, but we're also mismatched with regard to what our microbiomes, and the mismatch, which is important and might drive some bad health outcomes, is that what our immune systems expect and we're responding to microbial inputs basically is out of sync. So our immune system, our hormones are out of step with our microbiome, and that may actually cause problems. So that's the working hypothesis that I have.
Do you have any doctors who have cortisol deficiencies, like Addison's disease? Anybody like that?
Not that I know of.
That would be a really interesting little case study for that, or to have someone like that in the study. That'd be really interesting.
Well, we can certainly look at the testosterone thing because we can look at men and women.
Right.
And tease that out.
Yeah. Mike Sy says this explains midnight mud butt.
Indeed.
I think you've got the title for your article.
Title for something anyway.
Yeah, right. At least a blog post, maybe.
Yeah. But Gandhi, do you have any feedback for my crazy idea?
Sounds pretty reasonable. As I understand it, if you externally wake up rodents, they will also have a spike in cortisol upon waking. It is possible that the act of waking is stressful, and that's why you have a spike in cortisol. But it's also possible that when you're laying down in bed, your body's, your muscular tissue is not doing anything. And when you're waking up, it is. And so having vasodilation and increased heart rate and all these other physiological outcomes that are associated with a spike in cortisol are useful. Now, how that has,
No,
I don't know.
I would imagine that the circadian rhythm of cortisol production is adaptive, and does serve some function. It is also associated with heart attacks.
Oh, really?
So people tend to have heart attacks on average about the time that they wake up,
really,
or early in the morning, and it's associated with this cortisol spike.
I did not know that.
And also a catecholamine stress hormone increase.
Interesting.
I suppose that if you have this spike in cortisol, you're having a very large magnitude change in your overall cardiovascular state in a very short period of time. And if some of your tissues are changing faster than others, I would suspect that would make you at a higher risk for having a heart attack. Is that correct?
That makes sense to me. And certainly people that are healthy otherwise are not going to have heart attacks.
Right.
So you have to have some underlying disease and this normal pattern superimposed upon it. And we also know that people that undergo circadian stress just with going to daylight savings also have a spike in heart attacks.
That's the worst day of the year to drive a car. The most accidents.
Man, there's so many things to talk about.
Yeah.
I know.
This is obviously
kind
of driven a really great conversation. I find it personally very interesting.
Me too.
And I'm devoting still some of my research bandwidth to this topic. It's great also because we still don't really have an answer. That answered the question that I posed earlier. Why did sleep evolve? Yes, we evolved on a planet where the Earth circles around the sun, where we get this diurnal exposure. It's roughly on a 24-hour periodicity, and it drives all kinds of oscillations that probably reflect underlying trade-offs of the kind that Gandhi talked about. We should partition various efforts by time of day and by season, and it's remarkable that I think that this oscillatory pattern has gone understudied for so long in anthropology and biology and in medicine. It really is a new frontier.
And sleep seems to serve different functions in different creatures. It goes all the way down to prevertebrates, way down to insects and so forth. And it's not clear that it's doing the same thing for all of us. So one thing to look at would be, are these variations on a theme, or have we taken a pre-evolved thing like sleep and turned it to our own uses the way that we use estrogen, which is a plant hormone, but is now a human secondary sex hormone. And
dopamine, which is a microbially derived neurochemical that is now a neurotransmitter in our brain.
So does each species repurpose sleep to their own thing, or are we all doing variations on some central theme?
Good question.
Great
I
question.
see a review, the need for a review article that looks at this in a really comparative perspective.
Would it be written by a guy named Gandhi?
Maybe,
yeah. We'll just put that on his plate.
Yeah, I got a real big plate at this point.
After April 8th. How about that? You can't touch it till after that.
Well, we'll see if the grant is funded. I think that's going to be a pretty big determinant.
Sure.
Well, do we have time for one or two more questions?
Let's see. What did we have earlier? Let me see.
Can't get over the midnight mud butt.
I know. I think we kind of covered a lot of it. Oh, there is one more from Nicodemus. Is there any discussion related to changes in mean atmospheric temperature, metabolism, and potential influences on sleep patterns?
Well,
So,
temperature
like,
is a big driver of
Yeah.
sleep.
Seasonal
right?
changes.
Sure,
In
yeah,
fact,
yeah.
it's work that Gandhi has done, just to paraphrase,
That's right.
suggests that you're going to sleep better when it's colder.
Right.
So obviously not too cold. You don't want to have a major stress on your body,
Right.
Because then you're going to probably wake up to try to get warm.
Mhm.
But in general, having a cool temperature is going to promote sleep.
A lot of sleep labs endorse about 65 degrees.
Yeah, the sleep labs where I've spent a little bit of time, they keep them uncomfortably cold for the rest of us, but they actually do promote sleep.
Interesting. I was mentioning earlier in chat, actually, that if it's too hot in my room while I'm sleeping, I tend to have nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why.
So do I, but I think it's
like,
because
it
my
never
wife is
fails.
kicking me to the floor.
That's right. So I see a question here. Do night shift workers need fecal transplants? From Dr. WD-40.
So yeah, we were talking about that a little bit.
So we always talk about
Don't
fecal
drink the
transplants,
chocolate milk.
right? It comes up every single time,
It's not really chocolate milk.
right? So I guess who knows, right? I mean, maybe we could find a microbe pattern that actually promotes the ability to work night shifts and be metabolically
And be
healthy.
healthy.
I think it's possible. I'm not actually studying that myself,
New,
so we'll hold that one out there. Needs future research.
the newest
Right, there you
form of
go.
performance-enhancing drugs, fecal transplant.
Yep.
There you go.
Or maybe we should have to swap some spit, since that's the focus of my current study.
Yeah.
Butt doping.
So bringing it back to boinking.
Gotta bring it back. Wait. Wait, what?
LSL says, as a night shift worker, I'll pass.
But maybe probiotics, dietary.
Sure.
There are things that we
Yeah,
can do. If the microbiome is important in some of these things for night shifts, then there are some possible things we can do
Butt
about it.
doping.
Butt doping, indeed.
Oh my
that
God.
that might be the final word.
Yes, that's right. All right, cool. Well, I'm about ready for some sleep, to be perfectly
All right,
honest.
yeah,
It's
me
about
too.
9:30 here.
Well, thanks for sticking
Getting
with us.
there.
It's been about
Yeah,
a
couple
2-hour
hours.
episode.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
Gandhi was awesome.
Yes,
What a
thank
very
you
great
so
pleasure
much
to meet
you,
for,
sir.
for
Yeah.
joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we didn't even touch really most of what we had in the slides because our conversation with you was so interesting
But
and fruitful.
and the conversation always goes in great directions, and we don't even need those
Tangents,
slides.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. It kind of creates itself, honestly,
Yeah.
which is nice. It's fun. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Next week I am going to be traveling, so I'm taking the whole week off of streaming. Which reminds me, are you going? You're not going to the meetings, right?
Right
No,
now.
I didn't think so. Okay, yeah,
Let's
I
sneak
think
into
I'd
Kate's
ask you,
house
yeah.
and stream anyway.
Yeah, right.
yeah, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Grady will be here. You
Of
guys,
course, she has thousands of dollars of incomprehensible electronic
Yeah.
equipment.
She'll be watching us from a hotel room, messing with the electronics here.
So we're doing it remotely. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, no big deal. Might be kind of fun to watch. But yeah, so I'll be off next week, but 2 weeks from now we'll be back on with Evolutionary Medicine.
Back
I
on
assume.
track.
Yes.
And are we having a science happy hour this Friday?
We are having Science Happy Hour this Friday.
Thank
and
goodness.
So I have another stream tomorrow morning, but then Friday is the 1-year streamiversary party stream thing.
Streamiversary.
So yeah,
It's a portmanteau.
it's a thing. It's a thing on Twitch. It's an anniversary, but we call it a streamiversary.
I like
so. But yeah, so we're just going to be watching a whole bunch of fun clips from previous episodes of Science Happy Hour, and a whole bunch of people who have been on the show before are going to be there, so it should be pretty fun. So you guys should definitely come hang out. Even if you guys are new and aren't going to be necessarily reflecting back like a lot of us, it's going to be a really good introduction to what we typically do on the stream. So that's also kind of fun for new people as well.
Great.
So.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, it should be very fun. Streamiversary, aka drink wine. We usually do that, but especially so this Friday. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
Over and out.
All right, bye bye.
Until next time.